Alright guys, get some adjustments here. This video is going to be how to change your shock fluid using a vacuum pump. I've already pulled these apart a little bit. And this tile does not have a shock, or a diaphragm, excuse me. I like using a white bowl so I can see the color of the fluid, because the TLR fluids have different colors associated with the thicknesses. It's a new truck to me, so don't know what was ran previously. Looks a little bit cloudy, so I think there was a little bit of air in there since I moved the shocks around a little bit before this. Okay. Well, there we go. Looks like, well, kind of hard to tell the fluid, but maybe 32. Anyway, I'm gonna clean these up a little bit and go from there. Trying to get some of that fluid out of there. Alright, here we go. I'm going to do some 32.5 TLR. Oops. Yep, forgot that. And there we go. Now to get air bubbles out, move it up a little bit slow. Let it sit for just a second. Since it's fairly thin fluid, bubbles should come up pretty quickly. Wow, I didn't have a whole lot of bubbles on this one. Quite interesting, but I don't see any foaming yet, but I don't trust that. So I've got my trusty Food Saver vacuum sealer here, and we're going to stick the shocks here. Let's fill the other one. Do the same thing. There's a little bit of bubbles there. Let's sit for a second, let the bubbles come up, see if I can see them. There's a couple in there, not too terrible. Alright, put them in this vacuum chamber. And what this does is, when it pulls the vacuum, it will make the little bubbles expand and turn into big bubbles, and makes them rise to the top quicker. So, get this. Let's see if we can see what we see when I hit the vacuum. See. Okay, so there we go. You can see them bubbles come to the top. These shocks have been sitting for about 15 minutes, and moved the plunger down, and then back up, waited some time, pulled it back down, waited some more, and then let them set 15 minutes and see that froth. We got quite a bit of frothing going on, so I'm gonna let that sit for a few minutes until the frothing, the bubbling stops, and then I'll push the piston up, vacuum again, wait for the bubbles to stop, pull it down. You can definitely speed up your work here if you got some type of vacuum machine to get these bubbles come up to the surface a little bit quicker. Sometimes I just have a few beverages in between waiting for these bubbles to come up. There we go. My good old beverage here. I got some of these bubbles. Well, there ain't no bubbles there. Maybe a little bit. Anyway. So we're just going to do this a couple more times where I'm going to leave the piston in the up position when I vacuum and run it up and down, and then leave it in the down position. I'm just going to rinse, lather, repeat. Keep doing the same thing. It's probably going to take about 3 or 4 cycles, and you will have every little bubble out of there. So we'll cut this one and I'll come back here in a second. Okay guys, here we are. We've cycled it probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 times, letting it sit a few minutes in between. Seriously don't know how people could do this without a vacuum pump and actually get all the bubbles out of there, because even with the vacuum pump it takes quite a few times to get everything out. I mean, if you're pumping your shocks and you push them up and down and it feels like Rice Krispies, or you hear little hissing or anything other than smooth as butter, you've got air in your pistons. We'll show you the setup here a little bit later, but I'm about ready to cap these babies, so we're going to top them off. And these caps actually have these holes, bleed holes in them instead of diaphragms, so I'm going to lay the shock that way so that the fluid doesn't get out. I got too many hands, but I'm going to put a little bit of fluid in there just so I got a little extra on top. See, you got this little cut right here on the side of the shock. This only has one, but that's a place where a lot of times you can just, it's meant for bleeding out air, fluid, whatnot. So put this cap on here, even though we got that hole up top. And this is just how I do it, guys. There's thousands of guys out there that are much better at this stuff than I am, but I'm not finding too many people that are actually, that are those badasses that are, they're busy people, so they don't have enough time to create these YouTube videos. So anyway, I should have done this beforehand, but put that little, I'm going to screw it in just a little bit here before I screw this cap on. And the piston's down. Now I'm going to slowly twist it down tight, and I could hear a little bit of bubbling, squeezing out. Yep, there's some fluid coming out of there. So here we go. Let's clean off some of this. And this is going to be a mess. Of course it always is. So with these ones with no diaphragm, as far as I know, you don't really have to worry about too much adjusting a rebound and the amount of fluid that's left in the shock air wise with the diaphragm. where when you push it up and it rebounds back. See, we got some rebound going on with that one, but we still need to bleed out the last bit of the fluid out of this one. So try to tip it at an angle, let any of the bubbles come up to this side of the stuff, and I'm going to go ahead now, pull that plug, and now I'm going to squeeze this down and let this excess fluid, yeah, there's some bubbles, come up. There we go, now we're completely compressed. Pull that away a little bit. So with that being that, I'm going to now put that screw in just a little bit, and then we're going to test the shock after I get it all put back to see how much rebound we got going on with this thing, if I need to bleed some more out. Okay, now it's on flush. Wipe that sucker down a little bit. We'll clean these off later, but I'm going to pull it, and it doesn't pull back up. The diaphragm's not there. Squeeze up, and see, it doesn't rebound, doesn't push back at all. And this thing feels butter smooth. There is no little hissing or any little sounds going up and down. So we got lucky on this one. I got it done right the first time. So I'm going to do the other shock here, and then we're going to use this cool tool. I'm going to show you guys this RPM shock balancing and setup tool if I haven't used it before. So I'll be right back after I get the other one set up the same way. Okay guys, got the second shock done here. Wanted to show you, this one does have a little bit of rebound in it. I did the same thing as I did the other one, so I've got a little bit of excess fluid in this one. You know, shock preferences with rebound, it's kind of up to you. There's some good literature online about which would be better for your vehicle. For this particular off-road vehicle, I'm relying more on some stiff springs for the rebound and less so on the shock itself, since this doesn't have a bladder in it. There won't be that little air pocket with a bladder with the pushing down. So this is a hydraulic, and being that my other one doesn't do this, yeah, I am wrong. There we go. That one's doing it too. How about it? It wasn't doing it earlier, but it is now. But you know what? That little bit of rebound, I'm going to leave it. If it was like it was earlier, this one was staying in, but something must have changed while it settled. So they all feel smooth. I don't hear any little hissing or any unevenness or popping. So with that, I'm going to see how they look on the balance tool here. So this is a cool tool, and it does several things at the same time. If you haven't ever used it before, we're going to do this one here, and it's going to take me a second because I got the threaded top shock towers which I got to get screwed in there. If you don't have these, it makes it a little bit easier if you got these the other style just slide on. You know, got to thread it on there. So, but we'll do it since we got to do it. And believe me, this ain't no professional video, of course. So I apologize if nothing's in focus where, just a GoPro clip to my hat. So I'm going to tighten that down all the way. It's up pretty well level, not perfect, but it's good enough for our purposes we're going to do. If you wanted to, you could put a little spacer in there, make it absolutely perfect, but I don't personally think that is going to change a ton, especially with these top pieces being a little bit, having the ball in there. Okay, so here we go. Now this tool helps you balance your shocks left to right. Now, if everything's tightened down, tops, bottoms, the way they are, you pull it all the way up to the top, like this here. And then you take a look down here, and you can see that, it's kind of hard to tell at the angle, but the shocks are evenly, the distance, the length of the shocks are equal. So sometimes you might want to unthread or unscrew 1 or 2 or 3 threads if you're trying to get a little more space here. But if you're trying to set up some shocks that are a little bit sketchy, you can set them on this tool, pull it up all the way, and you can see whether or not you've got them equal. You know, broken parts sometimes different lengths and whatnot, but you want your shocks to be equal extension. And now we can push it down. You try to do it with a little bit of force. So this scale goes back and forth. If you've got one shock that's a little less, that has air in it, or you don't have the rebound the same as the other, as you push down on this, you'll see the scale waver to the weak side, or the side that has air in it. So we're pushing down, and there's really very little movement in there. That is good to go. Those shocks, I think, are going to perform pretty well in this car now. So there you go. Now it's just a matter of putting the springs back on, putting it on the car, and doing the front shocks. Thanks, guys.